pass for William. Daniels for the win. It's gone. LSU does it. Directing receivers, flips it to the end zone. Caught. Touchdown. Marvin Harrison Jr. making a huge impact.
Here's Edwards with the lay. Donovan Edwards down the sideline. Gets past Ransom. Donovan Edwards. Touchdown, Michigan.
Welcome into the CFF Sites preseason podcast. My name's Joe DeSalvo. I'll be your host for this show. I'll be joined by my partner, Mike Bainbridge, shortly. But just want to give you guys a quick update. We're going to be giving you guys some updates through the podcast periodically through the preseason. A lot of news breaking. Now that fall camps have opened across the country, everything that we're doing at the CFF site is updated, from the preseason fantasy draft guide to the preseason player projections. We've got everything updated and ready to go for your 2023 college fantasy football season, all of your preseason resources and in season as well, right? We'll be doing everything in season, from the projections to the weekly waiver wire. We've got you covered from head to toe with college fantasy football in 2023, as we always do. And I'm going to welcome in my partner, Mike. Mike, we're just sitting here talking about some weekly notes. We want to do these shows periodically to give some guys some additional insight in the preseason, some breaking player notes that are happening here throughout fall camp, maybe some updates on position battles. But we're going to run through that, run you through some follower questions that we've gotten in on Discord, talk about some position battles that are going on throughout the country, and sort of talk some risers and fallers here up until this point, guys that we may have liked during the spring and maybe not on as much right now in the fall, and vice versa. Am I missing anything right now?
No, I just add that, we're going to cover probably the top five to six storylines that we've seen to start fall camps around the country. I would just say that while we're just covering a handful here, if you want to see everything, all the news and notes that we find, we try to find over 133 teams, but everything that we can find out there for all the college football teams, we post in the Discord. So, we're covering a handful today, but if you want to see everything that's happening around the country or that we can find, hop into the CFF site Discord where we're chatting 24/7.
Yeah, that's a good point, because, when everybody comes in, if you get the All-American or the Heisman membership for the site, you're going to get an email that has the link to the Discord. It's amazing how many guys don't register for the Discord right away, but then all of a sudden, they come in mid-August, they signed up for a membership in June, July. The link is outdated. I have to update them with a new link and send them that. But yeah, there's a ton of people coming into the Discord. I know, the last couple of days, there have been some major news bits come out. So let's kind of jump into that, Mike, because I think really right now, the biggest news to come out right now in the lay of the land for us, as far as affecting highly ranked players, might be Devontez Walker at North Carolina, where he was ruled ineligible. He's going to file a waiver with the NCAA, but they denied his application for immediate eligibility. That throws a monkey wrench a little bit into this North Carolina rotation right now, because how long is that going to take to play out? Will it happen fast? Will it slow play? Will we get news in time for some people to draft? Some teams have already drafted already. Do you hold on to Walker right now and kind of keep your fingers crossed? So let's kind of tackle that one first right now. What's your thoughts on this Walker ineligible ruling right now?
I'm not usually the most emotional human being. I'm really not at all. But it was kind of sad reading the story about the Devontez Walker and when this played out, because I'm sure NIL played a part in him moving from Kent State to North Carolina and the opportunity to play at a P5 level. But I think a huge part of that was that he's from the area, so he was going to get to play in front of family, and he kind of, in the story that I read, he specified his grandma that he was looking forward to playing in front of, so he might not have that opportunity. So it is a sad situation for him. The good news is they're challenging this ruling from the NCAA. And I think the beat writer who initially kind of tweeted this out had a follow-up tweet that said, Mac Brown and the coaching staff and probably even Walker have confidence that this is going to get overruled at some point. So, and obviously me and you and everybody else that plays college fantasy is hoping that that's the case too, because he was expected to be their top contributor. So I don't know. I don't know how long this is going to play out. There's been a lot of, every, college football beat writer or college football media personality has been tweeting and talking about this. So I don't know, public perception, maybe this gets overturned shortly here because of all the pressure from the media. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
It just feels odd because it seems like everybody that files a damn waiver for immediate eligibility goes through, and then all of a sudden the one that we hear about is probably one of the bigger ones in regards to college fantasy football and just college football in general. I mean, you're looking at wide receiver 1 for the Tar Heels this year, quarterback Drake May's top target. Like this is a big deal. This was a big one for us and a lot of people, but I'm just more surprised because it doesn't like how many waivers do we know that don't get processed for immediate eligibility right now?
Yeah, JT Daniels is probably on his 6th school, right? Like it just, there's no, this is everybody's kind of main complaint too, is there's no consistency, with these waivers and rulings and all that stuff. In terms of on the field, it's big for North Carolina and their offense. I would say Kobe Pace-Howard and Nate McCollum are the top 2 that kind of get a bump, but I don't know that I'm going to, how much I necessarily want to change their projection, right? They're both in the slot, or they're both going to play in the slot. And who's going to, maybe one of Pace-Howard, eats into Nate McCollum's production and vice versa too. So, they'll get more looks if Devontez Walker's out, but I don't know how much necessarily the dynamic changes for them, from a production standpoint.
I just have a feeling by the end of at the end of the day, I just have a feeling somehow, some way this is going to get resolved. And we'll see Devontez Walker in a North Carolina uniform this year. At least I'm hopeful. I think that's, I feel hopeful about it.
I agree. The situation, I don't know if you saw this, that what came to my mind was that, did you see that story about the Baltimore Orioles play-by-play announcer who was kind of ragging on the team, even though he was reading legitimate facts? And, there was so much public pressure that they reversed their decision to suspend him. And now he's, calling games again for the team. So kind of hoping that public pressure from college football media might, change the NCAA's mind on this one.
Well, let's shift gears right now, Mike, and go over to Texas, where I know we wanted to talk on the running back situation. CJ Baxter, the freshman, a lot of hype coming in. Just recently, we've sort of gone with Jonathan Brooks there now at running back 1 at Texas. Let's talk about or get your insight on this situation a little bit, from where we were in the spring to here in the fall, Sarkisian's system, his history with running back 1s, and why it's important to really get this one right because of the potential in that system, right?
Yeah, this is admittedly, I don't give you too many compliments, Joe, but I would say this is where you are definitely better than me at with college fantasy. I get a situation like this with Texas, in the spring, and we've got that kind of uncertainty, right? We think Jonathan Brooks is going to be the starter. We don't know for certain how much Cedric Baxter or another running back potentially would eat into that workload. Jonathan Brooks, we thought was going to kind of take the reins in that bowl game last year against Washington. It just never transpired. So there was hesitancy there, but then you just kind of have to trust the system, trust the coaches, and it's kind of coming to fruition now based upon recent reporting from Chip Brown, I believe, from the Texas 247 website, who came out and said, in an article that he's heard from team sources that Jonathan Brooks is going to be that kind of workhorse back that we have come to see from a running back one under Steve Sarkisian. And that's kind of to me, this is the most noteworthy kind of storyline that's come out so far in fall camp, because, you were drafting Jonathan Brooks in the 11th, 12th, 13th round, along with, kind of pairing with Cedric Baxter. Now you got to go up to round 4 to 5 to draft Jonathan Brooks. I think that's where his ADP is gonna settle prior to the season, and I think he's one of the biggest risers. I know we'll get to that question later, but he's one of the biggest risers, definitely with our latest updates.
Yeah, and we say that, and we talk about this all year. We talk about how the schedule really plays a part. Jonathan Brooks can go in there, get that first snap, and all of a sudden run for 25 yards in the first quarter against Alabama, and then somehow put 2 on the carpet in the second and third quarter. And then next thing you know, he's not the running back one anymore. So, here's the deal. That Alabama game is going to be really big, I feel, for that running back rotation. If Brooks comes out of there as the clear-cut running back one, there's no reason to think that he won't stick, barring any injury, in that top spot. But I do think that Alabama game is a little bit of a stumbling block. Let's see how we come out of there. But to your point, all the reports suggest that Brooks is going to be running back one. And, look, they clear that first major hurdle of the season. And then all of a sudden we're on something with that running back one in the Sarkisian offense. But sticking with that, in that, Alabama, Texas, Mike, I think the Alabama quarterback performance is really where we want to go next. So it's interesting how that Texas tie-in here to that Alabama game is really matching up with our next talking point. Alabama quarterback performances so far through fall camp. Tyler Buckner comes in. We know that, the transfer from Notre Dame, who we were kind of leaning on during the spring. But look, there's 3 options right now. I would assume that all 3 guys are doing everything they can to earn a spot. What are we hearing right now about that quarterback room at Bama?
Still no clarity. And I think it's going kind of, well, I should say this. We have Tyler Buckner as the projected starter at this moment. Mm-hmm. I think me and you both would agree that probably to start fall camp, that Jalen Milroe would have been the guy to run with the ones, right? To get the first snaps. He's the most experienced within the Alabama, program. I think the expectation was he's going to take the first snaps probably in the first practice of fall, and then we'll let kind of things transpire, play out, and go from there. We would assume that Tyler Buckner, given his relationship with Tommy Rees, probably ends up as the starter. Practice reports not kind to Tyler Buckner. He's kind of running with the third team and seems like a distant third, kind of reading in between the lines there. So he had his highs and lows, I guess, in the first week of observations. I think the biggest thing of note is that most, you, me, others that do college fantasy kind of expected, hey, it's going to be either Buckner, incoming transfer, or Jalen Milroe. Don't discount Ty Simpson here. This past weekend, beat writers observed 11-on-11 portion. Ty Simpson made the best throws. The issue is the same that happened in the spring. He turns the ball over way too much. And he threw, I think, the beat writer said he had the best throws of any of the 3 quarterbacks, but he had 2 ugly ducks, and one of them ended up in an interception. I don't think Nick Saban's gonna, right? He doesn't want turnovers. He doesn't want ugly throws like that. So I think Ty Simpson has a real shot here to win this job. He just has to cut down the turnovers, has to be more consistent.
Coming out of spring, if I had to pick in this Alabama race, and I know we leaned on Buckner in the spring, but if I had to pick one quarterback that I wouldn't think would be the starter in 2023 in the spring, I would have gone with Milroe, just because I never thought he was impressive last year. I mean, look, he could run the ball, but I think if you gave me the choice of 2 out of 3, I was probably going to take Buckner or Simpson. So I'm really curious to see how that one plays out, because I have a chance to completely whiff on this, but that's why we have a lot of conversations. And when I tell you I'm not comfortable about a situation, I don't have any investment in the Alabama quarterbacks, because this is really one where I feel right now, based on what we know coming out of spring and just, early fall reports, I feel like I'm throwing darts a little bit.
Well, that's kind of another conversation, right? There's the one side of, hey, who can you project who's the starter? Two, even if you know who the starter is going to be, is it going to be fantasy relevant, right? Because you hear quotes from players that say, hey, Alabama, we want to run the ball more this year with our really good offensive line and stable running backs. And, I saw comments from Greg McElroy kind of projecting that, maybe Ty Simpson is the quarterback, or Tyler Buckner, in between the 20s. And then you kind of bring in Jalen Milroe, and he's kind of that wildcat option, inside the red zone. So one, can you predict the guy? And then are they going to be even fantasy relevant? Because, we've commented on the receivers. It's not that awe-inspiring of a group. And we think Alabama's going to run the ball more. So, whoever wins this job, are they even going to be relevant to us from a fantasy aspect?
Well, look, one thing we cannot predict, and that's injuries. And that's why, we're doing the show too. Let's go over to Tennessee, because we know injuries got them last year, right? With Cedric Tillman, who was on the shelf for most of last year, Jalen Hyatt, unbelievable season. There's some options there at Tennessee, but, it looks like got a little bit of an injury bug there this year right now. Mike, what's going on with that Tennessee receiving corps right now?
Everybody's been in and out of the lineup at some point. Brew McCoy, Squirrel White being the two primary that have been kind of missing time at practice. And then I think Dante Thornton, even yesterday, was on the sidelines at one point. Good news is they are close to 100% healthy as of today. And then they have a scrimmage tomorrow, Tennessee does. So we'll kind of get to see, assuming everybody's healthy and ready to go, we'll kind of get to see, rotations and who's running with the ones. I think the big talking point that me and you have discussed is, first and foremost, Squirrel White. Had the huge bowl game last year, but is that replicable for the entirety of the season? One, and then two, all this talk about Oregon transfer Dante Thornton, and albeit he's 6'5", they're projecting him to play in the slot this year. And is somebody going to get squeezed out of that rotation because both he and Squirrel White play inside? So I know you have some thoughts that on this Tennessee wide receiver situation that I think a lot of people kind of agree with at this point, that maybe there's not one guy.
Yeah, I feel like, look, I'm going to stay on the same train that I was on in the spring, and that is they've got talent there. They have something like Squirrel White, Thornton. There's going to be moments where these guys have a huge game. I just have a feeling this is going to be one of those seasons where maybe White leads the team in receiving 3 weeks. Thornton leads the team in receiving for 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe, there's a Brew McCoy that leads the team in receiving for a couple of weeks. I just think it's going to be spread around. I don't think we're going to really see that separation between a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 that we saw last year. And, I think that really bodes well for Joe Milton too, and who I have 0 shares of up until this point. And man, who's the receiver that's going to run 80 yards down the field and he's just going to be able to hit him in stride? I mean, the dude's got an absolute cannon, right? But yeah, that's where I stand with Tennessee. I haven't changed my mind now. I don't believe anything different than I did in the spring. I think we're going to have some receivers that have some huge weeks in this Tennessee offense. I just don't think it's going to be the same guy week in and week out. I just think they're too deep, barring injury, and everybody stays healthy.
I tend to agree. Like, I don't really, I don't love saying this just because of how prolific they've been, but I don't really have many shares of the Tennessee passing game, just because I kind of tend to agree with you in that could be Squirrel 1 week, Dante Thornton the next, and Brew the next. I think the reason people want to believe is you just look at the last 3 years with Josh Heupel being at Tennessee and UCF. 2 of his last 3 slot receivers being last year Jalen Hyatt, and then 3 years ago with Marlon Williams at UCF. These guys were top 10 fantasy receivers. Both averaged over 20 fantasy points per game. So if you can settle on that one, he is a legitimate league winner. Do they have that this year? Time will tell.
Let's go over to one more Power 5 program before we jump into our G5 Nuggets, Mike. And we have to talk about that Iowa State running back situation, because earlier in the spring, I know that when we were doing the conference podcast, I was big on Jarrell Brock coming back healthy. I thought he'd be the guy ready to lead that offense, revamp through the offensive coordinator. I thought they'd get that running game going again under Matt Campbell. We know we want the running back one in a Matt Campbell offense. Traditionally, that's the guy that we're going to target. But Jarrell Brock hasn't practiced in fall camp up until this point. And so all signs are pointing right now to Cartavius Norton. And you and I had this discussion just within the last 48 hours that, if we're taking Brock off the board right now, which I think is the smart thing to do considering he's not practicing, we're going to ride Norton, and we're going to ride him as if he's that running back one in that Matt Campbell offense. We've projected him as such. We've projected him close to 1,000-yard season. But I think right now, I know where I'm at with this situation, and that is, look, sometimes you got to throw in the towel. Where I was big on Jarrell Brock, I had to scratch that with all the latest news that's coming out.
I was shocked you did that.
Well,
I was shocked you did that. It's not your usual. It's not how you usually operate. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's not how you usually operate. You like the concrete news before you tend to make the full on change. So I was shocked when we talked earlier this week.
Yeah, it's the whole situation with Hunter Deckers, the gambling thing, there just seems to be too much uncertainty right now. And when I look at a guy like Jarrell Brock, who was coming back from injury, who hasn't practiced up in this point in fall camp, I'm just thinking, look, I'm going to throw in the white tie. Like, I'm not afraid to change my mind up into this point because I don't want to steer any of our followers wrong, right? So at this point, if I were drafting, I'd be steering clear of Jarrell Brock right now. And with that being said, I'm going in on Cartavius Norton like I was in for Brock because I want that running back one in that system. And I'm hopeful that he's now progressed in his tenure now at Iowa State. So, what are your thoughts? I just wanted to touch on ISU because this could, much like Texas, right, where that running back one under Sarkisian can be a game changer in college fantasy. That running back one for Matt Campbell has potential to do the same thing, although they lose Deckers. That Iowa State offense doesn't quite have the appeal. It's not as sexy as that Texas offense this year.
That's why I was more willing to bump Cartavius Norton's numbers to where we have him in the projections. I had already flipped him and Brock. I think I made that change even when like those initial rumors came out, but just thinking about it, talking to you, I was convinced to bump Norton's projections closer to that 1,000-yard mark range because, look, you're going to be starting most likely Rocco Becht at quarterback. Iowa State does have some talent at receiver, but you're starting a quarterback that doesn't have much experience. I think you're going to try and lean on that running game. And Cartavius Norton, didn't play out the way we kind of expected last year, but obvious talent. I think they're going to run the ball more with a new quarterback. It's that offensive line has just been putrid the last handful of years. That's going to determine whether Norton kind of hits that 1,000-yard mark or not, in my opinion, is the offensive line play.
Yeah, well, look, let's run through some of the G5 Nuggets, Mike. I'm going to let you kind of run through those real quick. I think we've got at least 3 there that we want to touch on, and it all affects players that are in, our rankings, particularly in our cheat sheet there on our draft day cheat sheet. So I'll let you go ahead and run through some of those G5 Nuggets.
Yep. First, we kind of saw this yesterday, and we posted it in the Discord. Hadn't seen it posted anywhere else. It was actually Ben Carlisle of Rivals that he's given practice reports every single day, basically play by play which is very nice to look at. And, I was interested in it because I have a lot of shares of Cyrus Allen at receiver. But so he kind of posted a few days ago that, looks like Marquise Crosby is going to, in his opinion, going to miss a few games going into the regular season. He did not say any timeline, didn't suggest that, but that's kind of what what I read on their message boards. Tyree Shelton, the former Miami of Ohio transfer, is getting all the first team reps at running back, and it is notable too. Not a high volume rushing offense per se under Sonny Cumbie, but I think it also is notable if Tyree Shelton's running with the ones that he's got running back and wide receiver eligibility on Fantrack, so could be a useful piece in deeper leagues. And just thinking about it too, you're down Marquise Crosby. Craig Williams, the former Baylor transfer, is no longer there. You're starting a guy that hasn't rushed for more than 500 yards in the season in Tyree Shelton. If this, comes to fruition, there's no official Marquise Crosby news per se. I think this bodes well for the passing game. I think the strength is the receivers in this room with Cyrus Allen, Smoke Harris. Some other guys have been making names. True Edwards, a JUCO transfer, has been making waves that I read. Hank Bachmeier at quarterback. I think this bodes well for the passing game. You're not handing the ball 200 carries to Tyree Shelton.
Yeah, I agree. So. I love Marquise Crosby going into this year. It's a bummer that news broke. Doesn't necessarily mean he won't be good for fantasy owners, particularly in the second half of the season if he can come back. We've talked about that Conference USA schedule, and when we did get some news as well, I bumped up Hank Bachmeier as well. And in the latest draft we were in, I have him in my draft as one of my later quarterbacks. So that was over at Louisiana Tech. What about over at San Jose State, Mike, where we've got something on Justin Lockhart, the receiver over there, who we've got projected at wide receiver 1 for the Spartans?
Yeah, I saw this 2 days ago. Of course, it was literally after I drafted him in a best ball that I'm in right now. But Jackson Moore of 24/7, who does a tremendous job covering a bunch of teams on the West Coast, did note that he saw Justin Lockhart in a cast. So that was a couple days ago. Haven't seen any official reports or anything in the last handful of hours. So just something to monitor there. And of course, if we find something, we'll post it in the CFF site Discord.
And then one more note. Let's go over to Wyoming, the running back situation. We got news just a couple of weeks ago that Harrison Whaley, the NIU transfer, was probably going to miss up until 2 games of the season. It looks like DeJuan McNeely went down with what seems to be a knee injury. We don't have anything official on the status of that injury or if it's going to affect any of his time, but potentially it could. Where we were looking at a really deep Wyoming backfield, now all of a sudden seems to be paper thin, and DQ James, who was the smaller back of all the 3, just might get a little preseason boost here to start the year. Anything update on McNeely's injury, or we just have that he went down right now?
Yeah, I only saw the initial tweet. Haven't really dug into that too much. We do know for sure Harrison Whaley is going to be out for at least 2 games to start the regular season, if not more. We did hint that in our preseason podcast series covering Wyoming that Harrison Whaley does have that was our hesitancy, right? With Whaley, he had a propensity to get injured during his time at Northern Illinois, and look what's popping up again. So with him out, with McNeely potentially missing time, DQ James likely would be the starter here. The issue, he's 170 pounds, 5'7". Explosive back, though. He rushed for 179 yards against Hawaii, 120 against Utah State last season. So explosive back. I know there's some in our folks in our Discord that really are high on DQ James. So would imagine he starts if McNeely and Whaley are out. LJ Richardson probably in the mix too there. So kind of wait and see there.
Yep. Well, look, let's get into some follower questions, Mike. I know you put the question out in Discord. We got some questions. We're going to run through a few of those. I'll just go randomly and kind of run them out. Let's just start more. I'll start with Chris K, friend of the site, right? One of his questions,
Quote unquote friend. Yeah.
a non tight end first rounder, most likely to be a bust this year. Where do you stand with that question?
I'm going to cheat with my answer here. I don't think Torrey Horton will bust per se, but I can see a path to where he doesn't live up to his first round building, because he's essentially going in the first round of every single fantasy draft that we've taken part of. One, you need the Colorado State offense to be much better than last year, right? I know he produced at a high consistent clip, but we would like to see that Colorado State offense. I mean, they didn't score 20 points in a single damn game last year. So need that Colorado State offense to improve. They obviously brought in a crap ton of transfers to try and bolster, the offensive line and other parts of their roster. I think for me, it's the fact of how many, or the surrounding pieces for Colorado State around Torrey Horton. Justice Ross Simmons, a sophomore, very talented player, expected to start opposite Torrey Horton. Dylan Goffney, brought in from SMU, another player that people were high on during his time with the Mustangs. Obviously didn't play out that way, but I think he might start in the slot. And then Dallin Holker, the BYU transfer, starting at tight end. People are also very high on him. Don't think he's going to produce Cole Turner like numbers, but should be a 30 catch tight end, maybe 40. So I just don't see, Torrey Horton had 37% target share last year. I just do not see that happening. For him to reach first round value, I think Colorado State's going to have to score 30 points a game, in my opinion. And that's asking a lot after what they did last year.
Well, when I look at my top 7 receivers, Horton being among that, he's not the name I think I'm most worried about. Even when I look at the running backs, I look at my top 10 and I'm like, I could see all of those guys, bar an injury, being solid. The one for me that I feel most nervous about is Drake May, quarterback, North Carolina. And for as much as I like Drake May as a quarterback, I'm with Phil Longo gone. And I feel like May is the talent that kind of doesn't matter what the system is, but I feel like it kind of does. And I'm nervous to jump on Drake May this year as a first round pick. I don't have any shares of him. I love him as a player. I think he's a tremendous NFL talent. I'm just worried about the system this year. And the news of Devontez Walker didn't help at all either. But I think for me, he's the one that I'm most nervous about.
Rebuttal. Would your answer have been Drake May if we did this Walker news?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I'm saying it didn't help. So I feel even more firmly on that one. Not that he's the one that makes me nervous. And in the spring, I think I was nervous about Bo Nix more so than Drake May. But as the summer progressed, I started to feel a little bit more nervous about Drake May than Bo Nix.
20.4 fantasy points per game, the QB1 under Chip Lindsey has averaged the last 9 seasons. Not great. So
no, not great. And like I said, last year, you could have made a case that through the first 10 weeks of the college football season, Drake May was the best college fantasy football player in the country. I mean, he hit the wall the last couple of weeks, but his numbers were even better than Caleb Williams up until that point.
Yeah. And I've kind of made this point. I made this point in our ACC preview that, I was asked the question, is he the Brennan Armstrong of this year, right? New offensive play caller. Does he take a dramatic step back? And I just kind of rebutted that with, and you said it yourself, Drake May is a top 2 quarterback in this upcoming NFL class. He's going to be a top 2 pick in the NFL draft. he is, he's a good enough quarterback to, how do I want to phrase this? He's a good enough, he's a talented enough player to outperform his, offensive coordinator. You fumbled that, but you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah. He is that talented of a player. Obviously, the Devontez Walker news hurts, and I think that was also part of the argument too, is that they had the talent around him to succeed as well, and now you take out his best wide receiver potentially.
Well, look, let's go into the next question. This came in from Sports Data Stuff. Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Drake May. Who are you drafting? Who has the higher upside? Who has the highest bust potential? I'll go ahead and take this one first, since I already kind of feel like I led into this. Obviously, the bust potential for me is going to be Drake May. Who are you drafting? Feels obvious. Caleb Williams for me. Who has the higher upside? For me, again, I just said that I was kind of 50-50 on bust potential on Nix, a little bit in the spring. I do like the offensive coordinator coming in. That's why I do like him now. But if you remember, this was something I remember I told you. I don't know if I said it on the show when we did the podcast for the Pac-12, but yeah, I'm just worried about, because of Nick's injury last year, if they win some games early on and they're still in it, if they're really going to overuse him in the running game this year, considering that Oregon team just kind of hit a wall a little bit when he's so vital to that team. I just kind of feel like Caleb Williams is like a warm knife through butter right now. He's just going to be able to put up points in that Lincoln Riley system. So I'm drafting him, and undoubtedly he's got the higher upside.
Higher upside than
Nix and May. Yeah. I feel like Williams' upside is higher than all three of them. To me, that's an easy one.
I am going to correct you. The question was Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, or Austin Reed. Now that I'd like to hear your answer to that one now.
Okay. Well, then I wrote it down wrong. But I still say the highest upside is still Caleb Williams, and that's the one I'm drafting because of the rushing ability.
Okay. Yeah. I would say upside is Reed. I think he's, at least from a collegiate level, I think he's just as good as Bailey Zappi. So, I mean, I think 60 touchdowns in a season is probably a very outlandish, but, who's to say he can't throw 40? He threw 40 touchdowns last year in 14 games. I think 40 in 12 games this year is well within range. We've spoken about the conference realignment and the new CUSA, not littered with strong defenses there. So I think I would go Austin Reed and upside. And I think league scoring would play a part in that. 6 touchdown passes versus 4 touchdown passes. I think I'm, obviously would lean slightly towards Austin Reed in a 6-point passing TD league. Don't see any, would you agree? No bust potential barring injury with Caleb Williams?
I don't see bust potential for Caleb Williams or Austin Reed.
Okay.
No, I don't. Yeah. I just, we talked about this, and this will lead into one of the questions that we have coming up. But I don't see how Western Kentucky gets challenged much in that conference. I think they're going to be able to basically call their shot on the number they want to put on the scoreboard. I just hope that there are some teams that could play them and keep the game close, just so we see Austin Reed chunking it around for 60 minutes.
Yeah, I think the only roadblock in his schedule is Ohio State, week 3. I'm looking at it. Yeah, that's it. South Florida, Holy Cross. Troy probably keeps it close.
Sure, yeah. Troy's one, yes.
Middle Tennessee. Louisiana Tech, I think maybe it probably could score.
As long as they can score, as long as they playing teams that can score, Reed will be on the field.
That last month, though, to your point, UTEP, New Mexico State, Sam Houston State, and Florida International. Yeah, we'll see.
That's going to be a stretch in the schedule where you're hoping that Western Kentucky is going to score 50 points and Reed hopefully has 30 plus by halftime.
Yeah.
Well, look, that's going to lead into our next question from Jordan Kruger, who asked us to give us some of the top teams, top offenses that have bad defenses. And that kind of plays into what we were just talking about. You want those offenses, good offenses, to stay on the field. A good offense or great offense with a dominant defense doesn't necessarily translate into college fantasy football domination. You want those good offenses with the bad defenses. You have some teams for Jordan to target here in drafts?
Well, I will admit this is one of my off-season projects that I want to tackle after the season. This is just kind of gut feels that I'm going to give here. I want to do a deeper statistical dive on the impact of kind of fantasy production when you have for a quarterback or running back, whatever, that plays on a team with a bad defense, say a Drake May with North Carolina. And obviously the inverse of that, if you're a quarterback with a really good defense. Just looking over Bill Connolly and his S&P ratings defensively, USF, Ohio, Arizona, Northern Illinois, and Georgia Southern, all teams ranked 120th or lower in S&P projections. So, and I think you would agree, like Arizona is going to be a really good offense. Ohio obviously is going to perform well in the MAC. Georgia Southern and their high flying passing attack. So I think those are 5 teams that I would be on the lookout for. A P5 team, Duke, 61st in defensive S&P, maybe one of the lower rankings in the ACC there defensively. So I think those 6 teams kind of stood out from that standpoint of weaker defenses that we could see some shootouts from those teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're close. I think we're pretty much at a day and age where, the days of the dominant defenses they've kind of come and gone. I mean, you've only got so many Georgias now in college football. I mean, look at the transition even Alabama made a few years ago by going offensive. And when we saw them go offensive, their defense did suffer a little bit. They did allow more points. So that's just the trend with college football right now. You're not seeing many dominant defenses, and those track offenses are basically giving defenses less time to rest. And so even some of the better defenses from years past are giving up more points nowadays. It'll be curious to see what happens with a few changes, teams like Wisconsin coming in, but you've got Luke Fickell and he's known for his defense too, right? But this is going to be a Wisconsin offense that's going to play a little bit faster. So let's see, where Wisconsin's really had a good dominant defense over the last few years. Let's see if them playing faster statistically hurts the defense when it comes to giving up numbers. So I like those type of things that you work on, Mike. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, obviously Georgia Southern, one of those teams that pops at the top of my head too. We want Western Kentucky to be at the top of the list, right?
Where do they? It'll take me a while to find it. Yes, I agree with you. I hope their defense is absolute trash.
But we talked about that in the spring too with UNC, with Drake May, and with the new changing of new offensive coordinator. We want them to be playing from behind most of the game, so May and that offense stays out on the field, which is why we have him ranked high, even though there's some concerns on my end. So I mean, we could make a case for this probably for 50% of the FBS.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, look, let's end it on this one. Matthew Desmond asked biggest risers and fallers since spring camp. This is a great question to kind of wrap everything up in regards to content. So I don't know if you want to handle these just randomly. I don't know if you have some for each position. But I'll start off with this one, Mike, and I'll take this because I've got really, risers. I've got 2 at each position. And for me, one of the ones I'll start off with, biggest risers, I love Brennan Armstrong a lot more now than I did in the spring. Just thinking back to his reunion with Robert Ernai, they add Bradley Rosner in the transfer portal, really a piece they needed for that offense. I think we know what we're going to get from Armstrong if he stays healthy from a running standpoint. God, man, I really like Brennan Armstrong a lot now than I did just a month or 2 ago.
Yeah, I think his biggest question was just kind of surrounding talent, right? And you add a Rosner, Terrell Timmons, the sophomore, has been, a name that's popped up in practice reports, and they're true freshmen, right? Kevin Conception and Juice Farine at tight ends also have been making waves still now in fall camp too, in addition to what they did in the spring. So I think emergence of the surrounding pieces around Armstrong definitely increases his value at the quarterback position.
You take the next one, man. Where you want to go with this?
Yeah, I've just Samuel Brown from Rutgers. We have we have the data, right? We have the data. We see the data. We knew even back in February and March that offensive coordinator Kirk Soraka loves to feed his running back one, right? 39% volume share more in 7 of the last 9 years that he's been offensive coordinator. It was the health, right? Or his health status. And we got nothing really from Greg Schiano in March and in April. After he had the injury last year as a freshman. In May, you start reading reports that he's near or at full health, and now he's running with the ones in fall camp. So with health aside, an emerging sophomore who proved it last year. He had 20 some carries for 100 yards against Indiana. He's 6'1", 220 pounds. He can handle a heavy workload. You have an offensive coordinator that loves to feed his running back. I think it's a perfect marriage. You're not going to ask Gavin Wimsatt to throw the ball 30 times, right? We've seen that. We don't want that. So I think Samuel Brown has probably been my biggest riser since the spring because of kind of the clarity that we've gotten with his health status.
Yeah, another one for me, biggest riser. I'll stay at quarterback because another one there. Not that I didn't like him, but I really like Preston Stone a lot more than I did in the spring. I just feel a lot stronger now about him. That SMU schedule, man, when you look at that SMU schedule, Mike, other than that game at Oklahoma the second week of the season, I just don't, even the road game at TCU shouldn't be a problem. I just don't see anywhere on that schedule unless they completely just tank it in a game. I don't really see where that schedule is going to slow down SMU's offense this year. They added a lot of pieces. I just feel like Preston Stone is going to be money this year. I like him a lot now more than I did back in April.
Positive reports. I don't think, I would say we're fairly confident they don't have a Rashee Rice type. Obviously we have
Jordan Curley.
Yes. Curley as a top 15 receiver this year, should get 100 targets. That's kind of what you expect out of that offense. But I just so many pieces, right? They bring in so many transfers. Got Jordan Hudson from TCU, Jake Bailey, the slot receiver, healthy, and has probably emerged as the number 2 receiver actually so far in fall camp. RJ Maryland put on a bunch of weight. Report came out about him recently. Multiple options in the running game. Like, they've got so many pieces around Preston Stone. It's really hard to see a path for him to, well, I shouldn't say that, but just so many surrounding pieces that it should be a really explosive offense and versatile, diverse offense as well.
You got another one for us?
Just a quick one at quarterback. Garrett Schrader, I think, has jumped up a little bit for me, and it's 2 parts. So like Justin Lamson transferring out, so there's really no option behind him, right? Justin Lamson kind of challenged Garrett Schrader during the offseason and even last year for that starting job, but there really is no clear-cut backup behind him this year that can challenge him. And there was a report that came out from Syracuse.com last month that specifically said, let me pull it up here real quick. And it said, it had a distinct quote that said, this offense is poised to rely more heavily on the aerial assaults than it has the past 2 seasons. Now, catch 22, do we want Garrett Schrader throwing the ball 40 times a game? Debatable, right? But we want volume, right? And if he's going to look like Brennan Armstrong from a couple of years ago, because remember, even though Robert Anai's not there, this is going to be a very similar offense this year to what we've seen in the past. So I think volume strictly from a volume standpoint, probably 30 pass attempts a game, at least 10 rush attempts per game. I think volume's going to be there for Garrett Schrader to be a really good fantasy asset at quarterback.
What about any fallers at quarterback? Do you have one or two for you that really just kind of stand out to you over the last couple of months?
Just Malik Hornsby, and we kind of talked about him ad nauseum just on the Discord and in our Sunbelt podcast. But just the fact that they brought Finley in, and there's a report that came out that said he is the favorite to start at quarterback, but I mean, the beat writer is still kind of projecting TJ Finley to be the starter at some point this year. He's just not the solid top 20 fantasy quarterback that a lot of people expected because of the TJ Finley addition.
Yeah, and I think for me, if I throw another quick one, I would just say maybe Tyler Buckner, just because we're a little bit in the dark right now of what's going on. And, you have to project an Alabama quarterback in the top 50. You just have to, based on the potential of that offense. And I have a feeling Buckner's just a guy that may keep sliding down that rankings list. So,
sure. Yep.
What about running backs, Mike? Risers for you at running back. I'll let you kick this one off.
Well, I already gave you mine, Samuel Brown. So you
can you did. Okay. I've got a couple, and I'll stick with the Alabama theme. When we were planning and doing everything projections wise and rankings, I didn't really put a stock into Jace McClellan, right? I was just like, playing it like, okay, well, is this what we're going to see from Alabama? Are we going to see them mix it around? Then we looked at the schedule a little bit and saw, wow, they've got some games where they've got some decent opponents. They're going to have to score some points. I remember doing the podcast and we're like, I don't see them really skating through any of those matchups. That's made me really like Jace McClellan a lot. He's kind of gone up my list. I think he's gone up probably 20 spots from early spring to now, just because I think they're going to have a chance to ride him more. And then I'll throw one more out there at the running back spot, because something we didn't talk about when we were doing kind of injury news and notes and nuggets, right? The UTSA wide receiver core right now, with the Corian Clark kind of set back a little bit, Willie McCoy, who we have in there, maybe coming in at wide receiver 3, a little banged up to start fall camp. You got Ogle Kellogg in there. You and I have had discussion just because he may see some time with a little bit of the receivers being dinged up. I think that bodes well for Kavorian Barnes, a real experienced offensive line coming back. I think Barnes, even though I have him near the top 10, is a guy that I'm really feeling a lot more confident about as the summer and fall progresses, especially with UTSA's wide receivers being a little bit banged up. What about receiver? Let's go there. You got a receiver for us? Any risers, fallers, or do you have any fallers at running back before we even go at receiver? Let's take a look. You have any there?
A lot of my fallers are injury based. I mean, Marquise Crosby, right? Just kind of looking through the list. I didn't prep a faller. Like Jabari Small's been nicked up, even last year. And he's got considerable depth behind him. So, I wouldn't know if he's a faller per se, but just someone I've avoided. I think the fallers are really hard, because if you're tuned in to the updates on the preseason fantasy draft guide and the Discord, this becomes a little obvious, right? Like faller would be Baxter, riser would be Brooks. Fallers would be guys that get injuries too. I feel the fallers are a little obvious because it does take into account injuries and sort of depth chart changes, right? So nobody that I really have pegged or that I pegged in the top 25 at the beginning of the spring, am I really falling just based on no reports? If I had to pick one and one only, I'd say for me, the most notable would probably be Sean Tyler at Minnesota, Mike, just because I kind of liked him at the spring, knowing the history of that offense. But is he going to get that heavy workload? And I've kind of been scared off of him. I'd say he's the one player on my running back list that has probably dropped at least 15 to 20 spots without any injury news on him. Yeah, I'm going to preface I'm gonna caution our listeners that Joe had him ranked too highly to begin with. So I don't think he should technically be considered a faller per se.
For me, he was. Yes.
For you, he was. Yes. But I guess I would say that nothing technically has happened in this offseason that should sway you off of Sean Tyler completely, right? He's still going to be the running back one. He had a positive practice report today. It's just, we've stated this, right? He's not getting Mo Ibrahim type workload.
I'm just saying, I had him in the 30s. He's sitting around 50 right now. That's a significant drop in rankings. I mean, you're talking about a potential, 4th or 5th round running back where I had him to now all of a sudden more of along the lines of 6 to 8, right? So it just one that I thought was noteworthy that I could think of. What about receivers? Let's go there. Risers.
Start with risers.
What do you want to do?
I don't want to take your guy. I'll let you kind of gush about it.
I don't think you're going to take my guy. I
think I'm going to take your guy.
All right, well, go ahead. Let's see how good you are.
Jaron Bradley. You've been the highest on him, I think, of any CFF, expert or prognosticator out there. We posted a highlight video in the Discord, and he was showing up everywhere. Catching passes from Tyler Shuck. There's a couple writers have been posting videos of Jaron Bradley's potential breakout star here with Texas Tech. We spoke about how he closed the season last year. I don't know. I think he's solidifying. There's no official, something that's concrete saying this guy is absolute wide receiver one, but tea leaves are pointing that way. With his close to last season, I think he's solidifying himself as that clear cut top option. If I'm reading the tea leaves correctly there. Yep.
A player I liked a lot. I mean, I've drafted him, I think, in almost every draft, and whether
I think it's going to pay off. I think it's going to pay off.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the risers for me, and it's not that he was ranked low, but I think Jamal Banks, and I think that's just because of the Donovan Green news that have recently come out. That is one less receiver that we have to worry about. I know it's something that we have talked, whether it was on a podcast or not, but even guys like Phil Steele was projecting Donovan Green as an all-conference receiver, right? I think Green out of the picture now really clears the path for Jamal Banks to have a big season in that Wake Forest offense. So Jamal Banks was not ranked low, but I think really is solidified for me within that top 20 wide receiver rankings.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I answered a question in the Discord. We didn't really change we didn't change Jamal Banks's projection too much. It's just kind of more solidifying his standing as that top outside option there. So I like that call. A faller for me, and as much it kind of pains me right now, I'm just DT Sheffield. We don't have clarity there. We have clarity in terms of he is definitely starting in the slot. He is definitely with the starters. The writers that are covering the team are still uncertain how much rotation we are going to see within the wide receiver group because Washington State does have depth. Lincoln Victor will also start in the slot, but Isaiah Hamilton, the San Jose transfer, now healthy, performing well in fall camp. So do we see a 3-man rotation at slot receiver for Washington State? Plus Cameron Ward, not up and down to say kindly.
Are we talking about league winner Cameron Ward?
He's got potential. Yes, if he hits, he's got potential to be a league winner. Okay, we've seen what that Western Kentucky offense have done under Ben Arbuckle. Yes, he's got the potential to be that. Not looking like it so far in fall camp.
No,
far
that's
from
fair.
it.
Yeah. That's fair enough. We've got to see how these things play out. I mean, look, that's what happens. I mean, look, I'll throw another one out there, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the Brennan Armstrong that I threw up there. Not that Bradley Rosner was going to be a bad pick at Rice, but I think now him going to NC State elevates him up to my rankings as well. In that in that Robert and I system and having a quarterback like Brennan Armstrong. So he's a name that I'd throw up as a riser too for me.
Absolutely.
One more that I'll throw out there for a riser, and I tried to stay, I tried to look at, I'm going tight end, right? I've already said that I've really loved Mason Taylor this year. So that's not the one I'm going to go with. But the more I look at Penn State, the more my gut is really just starting to believe that a guy like Theo Johnson at tight end can really, like, for me, that's a guy that I'm liking a lot more now than I did in the spring. The more I look at that Penn State offense, we know you're going to get a heavy dose of Singleton and Allen. We talked about Drew Allar and his, he's not a mover, right? He's going to be a passer. And you look at that Penn State receiving core, and there's really no one. I could be wrong, but maybe Lambert Smith emerges. We don't know what's going to happen. I just have a feeling the closer we get to the season, Theo Johnson is just becoming a more integral part of that passing game for the Nittany Lions. Could be wrong, but he's a guy that I'm liking more and more as the season gets closer.
He's talented, that's for sure. I don't know that I have any significant risers at the tight end position. I mean, guys that I like, Jake Briningstool.
Yep.
Obviously somebody that I'm high on. I don't think anybody, I don't know. Clemson information is hard to come by. So I haven't really seen anything concrete on the receivers, which doesn't sway me from my opinion that Jake Briningstool is the best pass catcher on the team. So I guess I don't have, okay, here would be one. Thomas Yasmin at Utah. The last report that I saw on Brant Keithy from a week ago or so, still kind of mysterious if he's gonna be ready for week 1. I could be reading that totally wrong, but if he's not, Thomas Yasmin should obviously be featured heavily in that passing game. Still, I guess TBD if Cam Rising will play in week 1 as well. But should Brant Keithy miss time at all, Thomas Yasmin would definitely jump up my board, everybody's board. My top faller at the tight end position is definitely, I guess I didn't have him ranked highly, but he would be on other folks' boards. Bryson Nesbitt at North Carolina. I don't know if it's injury or just not performing well or something, but I've seen reports that he's working with the second team, if not the third team, in camp. Kamari Morales is the de facto kind of starter there. And John Copenhaver, I believe, was the third stringer last year, now working with the twos and all accounts having a really good fall camp. And we spoke about this during the UNC portion of ACC podcast. Chip Lindsey doesn't use the tight end position. Yep. So if Devontez Walker doesn't play, maybe they need Bryson Nesbitt to kind of provide some pass catching ability. But right now he doesn't seem like he's trending upwards per se. I think it's the exact opposite.
Well, look, man, that's going to wrap it up. I mean, I think we've gone a lot longer than we thought we were going to be. We thought we'd get in and out of here, do a little quick show, answer some questions. Next thing you know, you get you and I together talking about college fantasy football. We could talk all night, man. I mean, look, if you're not subscribed to the CFF site and you're not in the Discord, what are people doing right now, Mike? I mean, dude, it is starting to pop over there, man. So we are in the heart of college fantasy football season. We're just three weeks away from the season starting. Like, now's the time to get in. Updates are coming in, and we'll probably do another show at the beginning of next week, because by the end of this weekend, come Monday or Tuesday next week, we're probably going to get a lot more news. I mean, this is the time of the fall camps where teams are starting to get a little physical, right? They're not really dumbing it down yet to make sure guys don't get hurt. You start seeing that a little bit closer to, a week and a half out. This is now where a lot of the teams are really throwing on the pads and guys are going at it. And unfortunately, the next week or two, next 7 to 10 days, unfortunately, we're probably going to get news on a lot more players of injuries. And you're going to want to be in the Discord and really wired into the site to get those updates.
Yep. I would say if you enjoyed, us hitting on these news blurbs that have transpired over the past week, we've posted hundreds more in our Discord. So if you want to stay up to date with that, subscribe, get in our Discord, chat with us. It's a lot of fun.
That's it, man. Well, look, let's wrap it up. Put a bow on this show. This is the first weekly, really the first preseason podcast that we've done. we'd like to bang out at least a couple of more of these before the season starts. So for my partner, Mike Bainbridge, my name's Joe DeSalvo. We're going to see you on the next preseason show that we're going to do. Till then, guys, see ya.